guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And you may recall a while back, I did a review on this little knife. This is the We Knives Highfin, designed by Michael Gavick, Gavco Knives. And I reviewed this a while back and actually was very, very impressed by it. I still am. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous knife. The design is absolutely on point. And even for a small knife, because of this fairly generous finger choil, this is actually a small knife that feels pretty good and is actually fairly enjoyable even in my hands, which don't normally get along with smaller knives, but this is truly very good. Now, if you have watched my channel for any length of time, you know that any knife under 3.5 inches is really not in my wheelhouse. And many times when I see a knife of this size that I really like, where I love the design, where I'm really drawn to the knife, I'll make the comment that I wish it were larger. And every once in a while, I just want you guys to know that dreams really do come true. And so what we have here is the Hyphen XL. And so that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes. I may bring this guy back in for a couple of comparisons as we work our way through, especially when we get to size and weight. First of all, let me just point out that this, of course, is a Michael Gavick design. We've already mentioned that, but Gavco has been around for so long. I remember when I first got into knives, I really wanted a zero tolerance 0200, and I would repeatedly watch his review of the 0200 and think about how cool it would be to own one. Since that time, I've owned a couple of 0200s and eventually passed on both of those, but I still remember watching those Gavco videos and enjoying them to a significant degree. And so it's great to see the success that he's had and the great knives that he has contributed to the knife world. And this is definitely no exception. Sorry, I had an eyelash sitting on the blade there. So I want to talk about this a little bit, but before I do, I just have to mention the finish on this particular variant. Look at the way that catches the light. It's sort of got that purple, blue, that high polish shine is absolutely spectacular. And then as you turn the knife, you get the bronze on the edges of the titanium scales and continue to see that transition from blue to yellow. This is a absolutely stunning finish. It is so, so good. Look at that. I think I've taken a couple of videos and shared them on Instagram of this in natural light where it looks even better. But this is actually coming out pretty good. And I hope it's as I look through the viewfinder here, it looks like it's showing pretty well. So hopefully that's your experience as well as you watch this. Gorgeous, gorgeous finish. This is absolutely amazing. We has absolutely knocked it out of the park with this knife, which, given the fact that they were relying on a pretty spectacular design in the first place, is not that hard to do. The only thing, I'm going to offer one minor criticism, and this may even be totally misguided, but I feel like this finish, because of the shine on it, because of how dramatic it looks, it would have been nice to pair it with a satin blade, just a grinder satin, so that you'd get, so you've got this very high polish and then this muted blade, which I don't know if they match up perfectly. Overall, the knife still looks spectacular, but I feel like it could be even that much greater, especially, the top swedge here. I always find those extra design elements on a blade always pop a little bit more with a satin finish. But even having said that, this blade still looks pretty darn good. As you can see, as I'm kind of rolling this to catch the light, it's hard not to come back here and do this because that looks so fantastic. I love the purples and blues that come out in that. Anyway, the blade itself is pretty handsome as well and rather capable. Before we get into all of that, I do want to bring the original version back in because I want to quickly go over the size and weight on this. Okay, so The XL is just a hair over. It's almost 8 1/8 inches. The blade length is 3.5 inches. It's 4 11/16 closed, 4 11/16. So pretty easy, comfortable pocket carry. All right. No issue whatsoever with that. The grip area on this is 3 5/16. Now that, of course, is going to be a substantial difference. So I can comfortably have all of my fingers on this handle. And I have to say, the sort of harpoon at the top there makes a great resting spot for your thumb. You still get that very generous finger choil, so you can choke up on this. And in this grip, it feels very natural and very comfortable, much like I talked about with the smaller version. This feels actually a little bit better in the choked up position, but the extra cutting edge and the overall extra comfort and girth in hand is definitely well worth it in the XL. Now, having said XL, remember, it's only an 8-inch knife. So just let me grab, where did I set my pair of 2 down? There it is. So just let me throw a pair of 2 in here really quickly to point out that despite the fact that this is called an XL, it is not a really, really large knife, okay? I have, what have I got here that's actually large? So here's a military 2, and you can see, you know, if you think of this as an extra large knife, this was in my pocket, sorry, there's a lint on it. But if you think of this as an actual, you know, large or extra large knife, you can see this really is more of a normal sized folder. Okay, and just that the original Highfin was actually quite a bit on the small side. Okay, I've talked about the grip area. Now, I will say this. You only have about 3 inches of cutting edge. Not about, you only have 3 inches of cutting edge. So that's less than the Para 2. So it's not a super efficient cutting edge to size ratio. Often people complain about that on the Para 2. And so this is a little less than that. But you know, as far as I'm concerned, I have done a little bit of cutting with this. Now, it is a borrowed knife, so the kind of cutting I do is pretty gentle. Just open an envelope or something, and then, of course, use my testing medium that we'll get to in a couple of minutes when we start talking in more detail about this blade. Before we get there, though, let me just quickly point out the weight on this. I keep taking stuff off the screen that I want on the screen. The weight on this is going to be 4 ounces. Okay, so that compares, by the way, to the original coming in at 7 inches overall, 3-inch blade, a little over 2 inches of cutting edge, only 3 inches of grip area, okay, and 3.4 ounces. So, again, 7 inches, 8 inches, 3 inches with 2 inches of cutting edge, 3.5 inches with 3 inches of cutting edge. That's kind of how the key numbers sort of stack up for you there. And that should hopefully give you enough data to kind of figure out whether which one of these is most appropriate for you. And I will say, in both cases, the design is very, very impressive. Okay, now I'll get the smaller version out of the way, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the details here, including and beginning with this 20 CV blade with a blasted finish, which is pretty nicely done. Again, very thin hollow grind. So this is going to slice like crazy. I will complain about this one thing. I wish this was thicker blade stock. I know I got some pushback in the comments of a couple of videos where I talk about that. I definitely like the thicker blade stock. It just feels a little more substantial. And for an EDC knife, I want that. Okay, if I need a kitchen knife, I have kitchen knives that I can go and use. But I don't normally use my folding knife for, you know, slicing up tomatoes or those kinds of things where a really, really thin blade stock is super important. I tend to use it for things that are a little more potentially demanding on a blade. Now, while we're talking about this, I do want to do a little bit of cutting just to show how great that hollow grind actually is. And you can't feel this, but the reason I like this super soft, so if I use the other side of the blade, you can see this is quite soft. I don't need to put much pressure on this to get some deflection happening. And so the reason I like that is because I can cut into this and sort of feel how it responds. So there's the Para 2. You can see even with that flat grind of the Para 2, which is, I'll just tell you, very sharp and very thin, even though it's a flat grind, there's a substantial difference that you can feel when I cut in with this. Like, it's just like the foam isn't even there. All right. So really, really great. Yeah, so cutting performance is absolutely on point with this. But, and I know some of you are saying, well, Kevin, how can you first advocate for thicker blade stock and then at the same time advocate, talk about how good the cutting performance is? And that's because a hollow grind gives you that performance even with thicker stock. So if I were to show you, this Tuya Voodoo, again, I get the same result. I have to put very little pressure and I don't get a lot of deflection while cutting. So here's a much thicker blade stock, as you can see. I guess not much thicker, but yeah, it's pretty much, it's substantially thicker. And yet with a good aggressive hollow grind, it still slices, it still cuts into material really, really well. And I can say that about, a few different knives. So here's another good example, the Code 4 with a hollow grind, same deal. The Yojimbo, or in my case, the Yojumbo hollow grind, same deal, right? All of these hollow grind knives perform really, really well in cutting tasks. And that's why I prefer hollow grinds. I feel like a hollow grind gives you the ability to have thicker, heftier blade stock and still get great cutting performance, which is why I love hollow grinds so much. Okay. So by the way, I've got, here's my, I've been thinking about how I would describe this blade. I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section down below, but I'm going to call this a reverse Tanto harpoon blade shape. And I know that, that's not normally a combination we get together, but I feel like that captures what's happening with this blade reasonably well. If you disagree with me, I'd love you to share it down in the comments below. All right. Yeah, so we've covered the blade. It's 20 CV steel. We Knives does a great job with 20 CV. They also, by the way, do a great job with titanium frame locks on bearings, and that's what this is. The lock bar is nice and accessible. The action is very good. The detent is dialed in. There's just nothing to complain about the action here. If you've had one Wee knife or if you've had 10 Wee knives, you know that they consistently deliver a great action, and they have not failed to do so in this particular case. All right, as you can see, the deployment is via thumb stud. The construction is going to be standoff construction, and you can see the milling there for weight relief. They've got done a pretty good job on that. We have a mill titanium clip, which is attached on the outside. This would have been a knife, I think, where this would have been a good application for blind screws coming from the other side, but that's okay, it still works. The relief cuts are here on the outside, which, this is not a hard use, tactical, crazy folder anyway. There is, as you can see, a lock bar insert, but when it comes to strength, it's, it's fairly well attested that this is the stronger way of doing this rather than putting the relief cut on the inside, even though arguably on the inside looks a little bit nicer. So again, nice and accessible for that lock bar. Really nice drop shut action. Really, really satisfying deployment. Let's get some comparisons. This is a hard knife to do comparisons with because do you compare similar use cases or do you compare, similar artistic expression? So that's a bit of a debate. Here is the Bestech Navi. I think this is a very, very gorgeous knife as well. Obviously, we've had the original Hyphen in here a number of times. We can throw it in there again because, yeah, if you like smaller stuff, that's a great option. If you like the ergonomics and the overall layout of this, it's actually very similar, although I can't seem to pick it up, but it's very much like a Mannix or even a Para 2. So it's almost, you know, Spidernomic-ish. And so if you like Spydercos, you'll probably like the way this feels in hand as well. So those are similar sort of use cases. I've got, here's a knife that kind of, I think, fits in a similar category. This is the Yon Knives Chevron. What else have we got here? I thought I had another. Oh yeah, we already brought in the Tuya Voodoo, which again is, you know, a cool design, aggressive hollow grind. Doesn't hurt to add the Chris Reeve Knives in Cosi there. Obviously, kind of a different use case here, but some similar features: titanium, hollow grind, you know, that kind of stuff going on. And if you don't want to get into spending, actually, so here's something I did want to talk about with this knife before we move off of this. I think it would be pretty cool to see a Gavco Civivi. And we may have already seen one, but I just wasn't in love with the overall. I might be lying to you here, but anyway, this I think is a really great design, and it would work well in sort of a, you know, in a budget liner lock, or better yet, Civivi, if you're going to do something like this, do it with a crossbar lock or maybe even button lock. I would prefer crossbar lock. But anyway, that would be a cool thing to see, even though this is not in the, what would you say, super expensive line of WE knives. These are actually, you know, a little over $300, where some WE knives get up closer to $450 or something like that. So very nice knife for a very attractive price point. And I have to say, again, that this particular finish really is eye-catching. Like, look at that. That is such an impressive finish that WE has done there. You know, this is one of those knives where I just love to stare at it and take pictures of it and just oogle it, because it is phenomenally well done in terms of that finish. Feels great in hand, cuts really well, delivers all of the cool factor that you want from a high-end folding knife, while also being very utilitarian. I think the Hyphen XL is a really big win for WE knives. WE, if you're watching this, do a variation with a satin blade. That would be very welcome. And for those of you who are not WE knives but are still watching, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.